Welcome back to another episode of A Better Conversation. Not sure what the episode number is specifically on it, but we keep making them because you keep watching them. Today we are continuing in our series on issues that are before the Texas legislature, important issues that are being debated, are sort of central to what this legislation is supposed to, or this session is supposed to be. As always, my name is Chris Clement, host, president of A Better Dallas. We're joined by, as always, producer Kyle.
Yes, happy to be here again for the second school choice episode. And also today I made a overview of the Navy's 2025 shipbuilding plan. So we get to go into that a little bit, so feel free to check that out.
Yeah, Navy stuff. And we are joined today with our special guest, Mr. James Rodgers. I didn't mean special in a bad way.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Special guest.
It's special.
Okay.
That's good.
He's a special guy.
I'll let James describe who he is later, but great guy, smart guy, going to help educate us on school choice so that, again, we can understand the full perspective on it. What are the arguments for? What are the arguments against? That way, as voters, you can have informed consideration when and if anything is passed down in Austin. James, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Am I got the mic at the correct distance? I hope so. Love to be here. Always love talking education, politics. If there was, a format made for looking good and just voicing opinions, this is where I was made to be. So Better Conversation was just right.
The voice too in my ears is very
Good or bad?
Yeah, no, it sounds
good.
like you're selling something on TV late at night.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Well,
Like a smooth whiskey or something. No, not shake weight. Like a smooth whiskey or something like that.
Something good.
Yeah.
You're selling school choice today.
Who wouldn't want to buy it?
There you go. Well, we'll find out. So, James, if you wouldn't mind giving our audience a little bit of your background, what brings you here, what brings you with this passion, if you will, for education and school choice.
I'll try and be as brief as possible, even though I think long-winded is probably a good adjective for me.
It's the long-form podcast.
Good. Okay, well, I was born. No, I went to school to be a football coach. I was going to be the next Tom Landry, like every good young Texan boy. And then when I got into the schools, the education aspect actually kind of was more of a passion for me than the football. Plus, man, it's really hard to coach football in Texas. There's a lot of demand on that. And whereas no one cared about education. So I could be a superstar there without really trying. No, I'm joking. Except I'm sure. Worked in schools all over Texas, Florida, London, New York. I've worked at charters, publics. I went to a private school, both for my high school and primary, and then also for my university education. I can speak in-depthly about those. I got my master's from the University of Florida in education, and then I got an undergrad and doctorate from in education from Baylor. So I have both the practical and the academic. Some people might call it the bullshit and the real, but I've got a little bit of both in terms of what education looks like, what schools look like. I think I have a good idea of what doesn't work because we've got a lot of that in this country, and I think we're heading on the right track with some of these bills. If I can spoil my perspective.
All right. Well, spoiler alert for those of you, but what we'll go ahead and do, and we, in our other conversations about school choice, we followed a similar format. We'll talk about school choice sort of in broad strokes, and then we'll talk a little bit more specifically about the bills that are before the legislature. So from the outset, just to make sure that we're fully disclosing what is your position on school choice?
That we need more of it, and that the more school choice that we are able to provide to parents, the more competition we will get in an education marketplace, and that will better serve everyone, from the parents to the students to the stakeholders. That is the summation I can give.
Yeah. Great summation. When you're talking about school choice, what does it mean? What does that idea encompass for you?
Well, and I think this is where we've had a little problem in Texas is you could mean ESAs, you could mean vouchers, you could mean a number of different things. And I think we get caught up with sometimes the nomenclature. So universal school choice, there's not really universal, right? There will be some sort of oversight. There will be things that we are saying, no, this is not I don't know what you're Pornhub wanted to open a school and start giving out sex classes. I don't think that most Texas voters would say this is a good use. And so we have systems in place to check with both bills, HB3 and SB2, to check on those things and to kind of keep very loose parameters, which I think are needed. But there's no universality to it. There is no removal of state. I hear that one a lot. The idea that because there is oversight, it is inherently bad. And do you know how many countries don't have any education standards, any oversight?
In countries?
Do you know how many there are?
I'm not sure.
Well, I know because I Googled to prepare for this little anecdote, so I sound smart.
Let's hear it.
5. All right.
Okay.
Somalia,
Yeah.
Chad, Afghanistan, the Central African Republic, and one other one that you also wouldn't want to live with or have your parents or your kids anywhere near.
Also highest in AIDS.
Oh, there you go. But see, I knew we would need a producer. AIDS is bad, and education is good in summation. And so I don't want a system where there's no standards and there's no oversight. And I think that obviously we can look at the examples there. And then the states that have more competition and the markets that have more competition have yielded the best results in any industry. Why not bring that to schools?
One of the things that we talked about at the end of our last discussion on school choice was whether or not there should be some sort of opt-in, opt-out for the schools participating, for private schools, for charter schools. So it's like, okay, well, if you want to operate in we're not taking any ESA money space, then go teach, whatever you want to within reason, obviously. But if you're going to take the cash, if you're going to take the state money, how can you not have some protections of taxpayer funds? Like, I mean, that's from a conservative standpoint, that's the question. And, I use this as an example with a lot of conservatives that are skeptical about it. I'm interested in your thoughts on it. Would you want a Marxist high school, right? Are we wanting to allow somebody to set up a school, glorifying Karl Marx and this is what we're going to learn? Do you want your taxpayer dollars going to that?
Well, I don't think that's the right way to frame it, though. Let's take that one. A Karl Marx high school is established. Are you sending your child there?
I'm not, no.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and spoil for you. I'm not sending my kid
right
there. I don't think most people would. Now, I do think there are some dummies that would. Mm-hmm. That is their choice to be dummies. I would want, as long as those schools are meeting the standards, I think that it would be hypocritical of me to say, well, yeah, I want a marketplace, but I really just want to fix the marketplace differently than the way the TEA has fixed the marketplace. And so as long as they're within those rules set forth by that, which is they have to offer a common assessment that can be used for norming and data controls, and really that's it. And that they have to be able to prove that they're providing education. That's really broad. Like Texas's bill is like the Wild West in terms of what you're allowed to do. And I do think we will get some bad models, right? Karl Marx High might be the worst of them, especially when it comes to bookkeeping and paying the bills. But if people want to set forth in that and try, that's going to be the same people that are, antithetical to the people who are going to invest in the new school that's going to change everything, right? We didn't see AI being a learning device 20 years ago even. And now it's on the precipice of replacing the neighborhood school model. Right? And why do I need to go to school if I can, within parental parameters, teach myself and all these things? And I think it was smart that Texas didn't put the digital forums into either of these bills. I think both bills are considered prototypes based on Arizona and Florida. And I understand that, especially as someone who dipped his toe into 21% of politics, why try and reinvent the wheel when Arizona created a $4.5 million surplus in 2 years?
Right.
And why, Florida saw a 75% increase in the number of students opting out. That 75% is new students, right? That is new parents that are getting better education than what failed them in the neighborhood model. So that, to me, I want a broad spectrum, and I want the losers to fail. I think the loser school systems, not the loser kids, obviously, but the more these things die out. I mean, because some would argue that a lot of the tenets of the current public school system are, including me, are relics, and we keep them, and we keep them to appease other gods, right? We have the factory model just because we wanted good factory workers in the 1800s, and we kept it. We prioritize in funding math and science. Why? Well, we did that with the National Defense and Education Act in 54 so that we would beat Sputnik. I'm sorry, I'm not facing you. I feel very elitist.
No,
but
it's fine.
It's just because you'll set the mics like this.
It's fine.
Okay.
When I ask you a question, you got to.
I will. I'll do it like a very dramatic. And I could do 10 more, you know, and these are systematic principles in, you know, your kids' everyday experience. And if you go to ask your average teacher, they would say, oh, these are good practices. And they're not. They're just something we adopted at a time. And because we have moved into a monolith since 79, especially with Jimmy Carter, the batting 1,000, rest in peace. The deprivation of the Department of Education has only exacerbated this, right? So now Texas loses so much of its freedom and its autonomy to try and be experimental, right? And so much of the funding gets tied up in bureaucratic crap, like high stakes testing and things like $2 billion a year just in Texas, $100 billion overall. Right? You just cut that. You've given every teacher a $36,000 raise, or you've cut property taxes in Texas, most likely.
The raise would be nice. I got a lot of family members that are teachers.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's cool that Abbott came out and was like, hey, emergency situation, let's get some raises. Mm-hmm. The $3,000 for, you know, is nice. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But in the grand scheme of things, it's like...
So let's ask this. What would pay these people more? What would make teachers more valuable so that people have to pay them?
I think that if you would make an incentive, like I see, again, I'm outside looking at it, but I see a big issue with school districts. They can't get rid of their lemons. There's a lot of teachers that just don't pull the weight. They're just there. And then you have a smaller percentage of really good teachers pulling all the weight and picking up the slack. And it's like, they really can't pay them extra for doing better. Sure, they get good, progress reports or whatever they call them, and they can go out of their way to get grants. That's how they get raises. Mm-hmm. They apply for grants to get paid extra or get extra resources funneled into their classroom. But that's why I'm the biggest. I support school choice, just because a lot of my family members are really great teachers, and I feel like they should be paid more because the service they provide is more valuable.
But we don't regiment teaching like that. Now, private schools do.
Yeah,
private schools would prioritize. So I can sit here and as an administrator, I can tell you the 3 best teachers I ever saw. I can sit there and tell you why they were the best, and were they paid any more, one dime more than the guy who was hitting on the cheerleaders or the guy that was sleeping in class? No. They're all paid the same.
Yep.
And my genuine belief is that you don't see that in private schools. And so if we were to open up the model to where these teachers are competing with pay, because what's going to happen is the private schools take more students and people say, oh, they're stealing money. No, it's not siphoning. It's parents choosing, right? Yep. It's the same way that when better products came along, we diverted our funds from Blockbuster to Netflix. Right? That's what obsolescence does. The old dies out. I always tell, people made great buggy whips at this in this country. And I'm stealing this from a movie. And there was at one point one last company. There still is. It's in Massachusetts. And at one point it was one of the biggest companies in the US. And now they make novelty buggy whips.
Damn.
Because obsolescence, the car came along. And if we had a government that's like, no, you got to take buggies. We can't do this. We have to do it. It's like, that's what we've done. We've done it for now 120 years, where the way we've looked at, not 100, that's probably about 100 years. When New York and Maine really started stripping back, because we used to have private school and vouchers far prior to public school model. Most people don't realize it. We used to do this mainly because we didn't want Catholics in the schools. But prejudice aside, it was working.
Still don't.
James Rodgers does not endorse that message.
Y'all, you say that until all of a sudden you're trying to get your kids into Jesuit.
Yeah.
Please don't go look at my podcast.
That was a rambling answer.
No, that's a good answer. I'm still trying to resist the urge to fight with you about Karl Marx High School.
No,
we'll take that offline.
Okay.
Well, it seemed like
it's not the overall point just being like you talked about, and I think I'm glad you brought up Florida. One of the things that I've been sort of surprised at is how many of these anti-school choice people act as though this is the first place that's ever thought about trying to do this, and help us, we have no idea what we're doing, this is going to be the Wild West.
Right.
you have a place like Florida that rolled this out, I would say pretty successfully, and is now operating very successfully, has improved their education system, did a lot better than the Jeb Bush, let's start testing everybody more manner of improving schools. What specifically, because you talked about, Florida and Arizona, what specifically about how they rolled it out? What lessons should we have learned from there to not repeat here?
That's a great question. I think the slow rollout, and that's why I referred to it as a prototype. When I first read it, I probably, and by probably I mean absolutely, rewrote it in my mind to be the perfect James Rodgers bill. And so what would I do based on what is best for my community, my family, things, my experiences? I think the Texas legislature looks specifically at, because there's 15 states that have some form of an ESA, and then you have others that have school choice model, like New York City, as liberal as they get, but they have a school choice model within the system and within the public school system. Not a great one. Whereas ours, and so I think that's what we did, was just look at what worked and what will. So with New York, you keep funding bad schools. Well, we didn't want that. And with Arizona, they did the opposite. They attached the money almost fully to the kid. And that's why when everybody left, they saved all this money, because it's not that I get so upset the most when, what's his name, that Democrat down and around, James Tellerico, whatever.
It's probably best that we don't share his name.
Whatever that dullard's name is, he makes these inane points.
He's a great panderer. He's a phenomenal panderer, world-class pandering.
And so when he says stuff like, we're not fully funded, and I'm like, wow, we spend thousands more than the next industrialized nation, major world nation. And the only people that beat us are like 3 countries with like 75 people, like Luxembourg.
Right.
And they do not have near the resources in education that we do.
And that's something that people just don't understand. And credit to the teachers union, because they've done a phenomenal job of force feeding this point. But our schools are not underfunded.
Overfunded, if anything.
When you compare how much we spend per student to the rest of the world, it's like, oh my gosh, like there's a lot. I had this conversation last legislative session, comparing how much does Callisburg, where I went to high school, how much do they spend per student? How much does Highland Park, spend per student? And there was this misconception that, Highland Park has got to be spending way, way, way more. It's like, no, actually they're not. Like it may be like $1,000, but if you look at Fort Worth is paying more per student.
Yeah.
And then you start looking at other countries, and again, America's paying way more than they are, yet our results suck.
Right.
Yeah, there's a delta growing between every dollar spent and performance raised.
Right.
And it's just growing.
So, Kyle, what? To me, the big thing is that
I think you're going to create the first meme of the podcast.
That's good. I'll try.
The dramatic turn to Kyle is it might be the first. Might be our first memeable moment.
I was like, whoa.
Well, you said dramatic. The money doesn't go to the teachers or to student-facing programs.
Right.
That is the big thing, and so I tell people, it's like you use $100 billion just in high stakes testing. 100 billion. What do we spend on test prep and tutoring and all these other supplemental things to prop up those Bush boys? They love a good test. Even though the minute we I'm sorry, I will do 20 minutes on the test. I got to stop. Okay. There are these things that we continue to put money into, right? And my big one is like a DEI, official, right? I have yet to meet anyone with DEI who is ever going to come to you and say, hey, we fixed it. Racism is solved.
Right.
Because then they're out of a job, right? It's the same with, we talk about these NGOs who are financially incentivized anytime they find an illegal immigrant. They're never going to come and say, hey, you know what? Immigration problems are solved.
Right.
Go ahead and stop cutting us checks.
Yeah, we weren't worried about the trans issues until Obergefell allowed gay marriage, right?
And so when you create a position, again, that's not going to teaching and it's not going to student, and you say, okay, well, what is it? Is it going to school safety? Is it going to make sure that our schools are, well, no, not really. Well, okay. Well, is it going to, help? It's like we do all these things. And like my favorite was we see the spike since kids start bringing phones in.
Right.
And we have all these problems with emotional development and needs. And instead of sitting and saying, well, maybe it's the phone or maybe we do this, like, well, we'll just hire a counselor for every kid.
Right.
And I've seen schools that are like, yeah, we'll just do that.
Yep.
And that wasn't what the best schools did. The best schools are like, we're banning phones and we're going to do some big talks on like, hey, get off social media, blah, blah, blah. And that's what we did. I worked at I won't mention it because they probably don't like it now, but I worked at the number 2 district in the state of Texas. That's how they handled this big spike. When I worked in the Bronx, it was like, let's hire 40 new counselors. Well, those counselors are going to always make sure that they have a job.
Correct.
Any of these mechanisms that are designed to find the firefighters are never going to come and say, hey, we don't have any more problems, right? There's no more fires. There's always going to be that potential. And I don't think that you can govern, and definitely you can't finance. Like that's USAID, right? They're always going to be a sob story. And I know you have some other topics, but we can't.
No.
We cannot govern in any way, let alone educate from an emotive place, because that's going to have you governing from fear. That's going to have you be a prisoner to your empathy. And instead of telling people, don't be empathetic or whatever, instead, let's just not make it a governmental program. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. But I think
you're also living in the wrong era for not having emotive governance.
I know.
We're like 95% emotive governance at the moment. But
You mentioned the tests. If I could jump in real quick, you mentioned the tests, and teachers don't like the tests either. But I think probably for different reasons. Can you talk about the tests and how we're going to hold these private institutions that are going to pop up? How are we going to hold them accountable to a standard? Is it still going to be through testing, or kind of what do you think the mechanism is?
What are the language parameters on this podcast?
I can bleep things out. It actually sounds better.
So
we're trying to do family friendly.
producer Kyle goes blue quite often.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would prefer if we did not have
we can do
I prefer if we did not have like a Christmas vacation. Clark W. Griswold
not doing that.
Ramp, but yeah,
I will keep this intelligent.
you can toss it for you. This is PG-13.
You can't do PG-13.
The testing model, in the way that we have developed it and grown it, is hogwash. That is as nice as I can put it. We piloted here in Texas. And when we started handing out these statewide tests down in Houston, there was an academic phenomenon known as the Texas Miracle, where after 4 years, all these failing schools in Houston are suddenly A schools. They're all A schools. The test shows that they are just phenomenal.
Right.
The only problem, reading stayed the same. Comprehension stayed the same. College enrollment stayed the same. Crime in the neighborhood stayed the same. All these other factors that would tell you, hey, this school is still sucks badly.
Yeah.
See, I saved it there. Those metrics didn't do it. So they called it the Texas Miracle, because what happened? The teachers just learned how to teach the test.
Right.
And we started doing tests. And when I started school, and so they saw this, they said, well, this is a problem. Let's mandate it with No Child Left Behind so that everyone has to do this. And it passed with bipartisan support under George W. Bush. It's been a colossal failure. And so what you see at the national level is the same thing we saw when we piloted it. If you attach money and my job to that kid making bubble dot scores, by God, I'm going to make sure he aces that bubble dot, and I'm going to get my job.
Yeah.
Now I don't care. Now I have taken away the incentive to learn whether he learns and whether there is a thinking ability, because that's not it. It is now, and you have replaced critical thinking skills with bubble dot tests. Oops, sorry. And so now you've raised a whole generation to think that every question has an absolute yes or no. And this is where I think it goes into our culture and our politics.
Yeah.
Chris, if I am good and everything is either yes or no, if I'm good, that means you are evil. You're not just wrong. You're not just somebody who has a difference of opinion.
I'm evil whether you're good or not.
That's true. But it creates this
lawyer,
this binomial where you look at others as the worst they can be, because you have to look at yourself as the best, because that's how the test is structured. Right and wrong. There's no, like, essay where you're going to sit there and say, what are the gray areas? When I first started, we used to have these government discussions, and we would discuss current events and controversial topics, and the kids would bring it in. And that life lesson teachers, always check with your principal before you do those controversial topics. He will walk in when you're doing abortion, and you're going to think, all my kids are going to have like normal views. They're going to have that one kid that's just like, and he's going to do it right as your principal walks in.
Right. Quarterly.
We don't do those anymore because they're not economically viable. And what you find is if you incentivize and put all the money on butts and seats till 8:30, bubble dot tests, and pushing every kid to the most expensive school that they can get into, you will get butts and seats till 8:30. You will get bubble dot scores that show these kids are Mensa geniuses when they can't read and write.
Right.
And so there's this disconnect between what tests are telling us, and yet we continue to pile more funding on. We could get rid of the whole structure. And so to answer your question, what I absolutely loved about these bills is that it said you just had to pick a nationally recognized metric, and they gave like 50 examples that you can use, so we're not beholden to one test. There is not one high stakes test, and all they're looking at is not how the score. There's no teacher that's going to lose their job if they don't have the right test scores. What it is it's showing growth. Is the program working? Is giving ESAs, and we have to, like you were saying earlier, going back to the discussion of what you have to have parameters. If I'm investing my tax dollars, and you're a lawyer, so I have missionaries, so you're investing real tax dollars. I'm investing tax coins, and I want to make sure there's a return, right? This isn't altruism, right? I think that's what separates us from the left is this is the best thing. No, this is the best thing for society is to have educated people. Otherwise, we are wrought with again. What were those 5 countries that don't have education, right? Do we want to be them? No, we want to lead the world in our national education policy, and we don't. We have been substandard, debilitatingly so, since the Jimmy Carter's 1979, really since the National Defense and Education Act. But Jimmy Carter just was like, let's put the pedal to metal. Let's see how effed up we can make education.
So I want to kind of talk with you now a little bit about some of the critiques of school choice, give you an opportunity to respond to those. The most common one, you talked about the snivelly little weasel Democrat guy.
Yeah, that guy.
That guy. Well, it's just welfare for the rich. How would you respond if you were sitting on stage with him to the complaint, to the critique that school choice is nothing but welfare for rich people to send their kids to private school?
I would say, listen, Jimmy Talcum Patter, that is nonsense and hokum, and I don't think you have the IQ of yogurt. And I am very, very not rich, and I want my kids to not have to go to school in Dallas ISD, where I currently preside. I look at it, I will homeschool them, I will do anything I can, and I don't have to, thanks to Governor Abbott and this bill passing, to get them the right education. But you're trapping more people. And so the idea that it's like, well, only people that would go to private schools are rich people. That's only people now, because we have school choice, but it's segregated by economics. So what he's really saying is, rich people, you are going to get school choice. Enjoy that. Poor kids, F you. That's what he is saying. And I would gladly stand on stage with him, sit on stage and explain that to him. And I would ask him to look at the figure. How does he explain a 59% spike in Arizona? How does he explain a 75% spike in Florida with 1 year? It's saying people don't want something when they don't know that they have access to it.
A spike in what?
A spike in attendance and enrollment. So both states saw huge, depending on almost double in Florida, attendance into private schools. That's not nothing. That's a big number. And so to say they're all rich people, but...
So why not means test it?
What do you mean means tested?
Well, if the argument is, well, people that can afford private school now are still going to do private school.
Right.
So why not means test the ESAs?
Oh, well, you have a gun. You don't need police, right?
Yeah, that's a little bit different. That's a matter of that's a matter of self-defense. That's a fundamentally different thing. You already have the money. If you already have the money to send your kids to private school now, why do you need additional tax dollars to send your kids to private school?
If you have the money for private security, why do you need a public service like a policeman?
I'm not following.
I live in a gated community, right? I'm very wealthy. I can afford private security. Why should police still patrol my neighborhood? It's gated. It's got private security.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great argument.
I
Yeah,
think so.
maybe they shouldn't.
Maybe. So now we're going into selective.
Well, no, I'm just saying, like that's the question. Like,
right, okay,
I get that you're making analogies to other things, but like to the actual question,
Okay,
like,
so to the actual,
then why would you not means test it for this specific issue? What is the issue? What is the problem that would be created in school choice if it was means tested?
because it's still government selection as opposed to a government standard. The government should not be in the business, and I think this is where I have these moral objections with the way our tax code is written. Right, the idea that we should be punitive to people for being successful. So, because I have earned money, I cannot take access to a public grant and public use and public service that I paid into, that I disproportionately probably paid more to. And so what you're saying is, because I earned, we are now going to punish the wealthy. And I do not believe in punishing the wealth creators, into the government setting up and saying, we're going to have these for winners and losers. I don't know of another instance where I think that is morally okay. In other instances where the government picks winners and losers, I think we can agree that that's never worked out. Like, no one is happy because all it creates is this resentment. This is the whole basis of the DEI. It has this good ultra. Oh, we're going to fix racism. How? With more racism, right? We are going to fix school segregation by resegregating. We're just going to pick different people. The people that we used to have the privilege, we're now going to oppose. So we're now paying. Go ahead.
I think it is a little means tested. They kind of threw this in here with the cap.
The 200,000
it's like
or 200% of
it's like 500% of poverty level.
line.
So it's a house of four. It's like under 146,000, which is essentially two teachers working in the same household, really.
Right.
And under. So I mean, in a way, it is kind of means, because so I looked up real quick as we were talking.
No,
like,
go for it.
What's up?
I said go for it.
As we were talking, I said, in Texas, how many people are already enrolled in private school? Approximately 350 to 400,000. And so someone on the surface thinking, well, it's just like this guy, he's like, oh, well, it's just going to be an incentive for the rich. Well, most of these people, according to Gork, is they're going to be above this cap. So they're not going to qualify, or they're not going to be the first in line, the way I understand the bill, to be able to use the school choice voucher. So it's kind of means tested, and his argument falls apart on the surface.
Well,
the guy down around
talcum powder. Yeah.
Well, I guess to kind of give full shrift to all sides, I think what James is talking about and what talcum powder is talking about is when we get to the point where there is full school choice for everybody.
Right, everyone around.
Right.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, in most states that have rolled it out, there has been an incremental, okay, we're going to make it available to this number of students.
Yeah.
And then next year we're going to increase that number and increase it until we have universal school choice, or however you want to brand it at that point.
Right. That is, yes. So when I'm speaking as a fully fledged out plan.
Right.
In the same way that we'd still, like, as we discussed, I guess, off camera earlier, the current bills do not operate with digital access, right? Like, that's a big thing. And I understand why in the current landscape, they were saying, let's punt that one. That's one that let's see what AI does in 2 years or whatever.
Right.
And so, no, that I understand with right now, you do not want the first in line. And I know SB2 prioritizes students from disabilities and students from low income families, right? I think that's probably the right order in terms of, if you're going to be doing this a pilot and it's looked at incrementally. Ideologically, I do not want to punish people because they made money.
Sure.
And moreover, because I read Ayn Rand, is those people will do better with their money in their pocket than if we punitively, engage in governmental politics. But now I'm going to get into a Atlas Shrugged debate or something.
Let's not. It's a massive book.
It's good though. It's good.
So
It's going to take breaks.
This came up on the other podcast about, the students with special needs, behavior, autism, just go down the line. Do you think that with the voucher being, let's just say $10,000,
Okay.
Do you think that there's going to be enough private schools that are willing to take and equip to handle students with those disabilities?
I think they will maximize the need in that I do not believe starting with high need students, our current model does not meet the needs of most of our high need students, does not meet the needs of our low income students. And while we focus so much of our effort and our resources on special needs, they have especially the integration model has not proven, at least from the metrics I've seen, successful. So the standard is, can they do it? I think they will be able to do it again in that incremental. What they can take on, they're going to take on. But as this is the capitalist, this is why we want a market system, is this school that's taking care of my kid with special needs and it has this special need, it's autism or hyperactive or whatever it is, because there's all sorts of schools that have tried different things to meet those needs. And so I think we'll have hopefully a wide marketplace that will meet the needs of those. Like, when New York first tried this, they opened like an ESPN school for kids who are just interested in sports, and they have all these fine art schools. They're just that art. My wife worked at an art school, and it's these specialty programs. And whether they are successful or not is going to be dependent on whether they get parents to engage. It's not, I'm just going to do this school and it doesn't matter if it works and screw these poor kids because we're going to keep getting government checks because there's always going to be bodies that we own because they were born in our zip code. As opposed to come here, come get this. I would worry more about the other end, which is overtly and I think that's why we have to have the standards, is you're going to have schools that are nothing but scams that are just like, come and hang out or come cash checks and we'll babysit your kids. And so that's where I think, because I know the oversight is a big piece from some people in very high up in Dallas GOP, is like, we're going to have oversight, and they're not oversight from the comptroller. And that was my biggest, I could not believe the pushback from certain individuals that, oh, this gives too much power. It's like, that power's already there. It's just not in our hands in any way. I have no control over if my daughter, unless I go make money and buy my way out of this system, I have no way to get my daughter out of these crappy schools where she's going to be surrounded by students who are in bad situations, and we're all like, oh, we're all going to hang out together. This is how we help. We're going to force all the worst kids into the worst schools we're going to over-resource them, but not towards teachers or towards you kids. Like, no.
And that's one of their arguments too, is like, which is really messed up in my opinion. It's like, well, all the good kids happen to have parents that are very interactive or, involved in their schooling. They're going to be the first ones to leave. And so you'll just be left with all the parents that are indifferent on everything. Their argument is, well, now they're not going to have good role models. It's like, dude, I'm not going to put my kid into the wolf's den.
Well, like, you're not offering your kid as a sacrifice.
Yeah.
My problem with even using the words "leave them in" is I fundamentally disagree that public schools are the default for educating kids. It is one option of many, and the way that education has been in the U.S., Texas, however you want to put that, is the fact that it's almost like, no, the assumption is that you're going to put them in public schools. The public school in your area is entitled to your kid going to school there. You are doing something extraordinary by having them go to any other means of education.
You're taking away. You're
right. Because that's the argument. That's what talcum powder will say is, well, you're stealing money from the schools. Like, well, no, you're not, because the schools aren't entitled to my student. The schools are not entitled to any kids going there. It is a public school that is there. But if you want to decide that you want to mail that letter by FedEx, you're not stealing from UPS.
Right.
And you're not stealing from USPS. Like, I just fundamentally think that is the wrong foundation for even thinking about it. It's just, here's all these possible ways that you could teach your kid. You want to send him to the public school because there's a big yellow bus that picks him up and it's convenient for you. Knock yourself out. You want to drive, 10 minutes out of the way to take him to some other private school. You can do that too.
I think you. Sorry. Hey, I think.
See, now it's like,
now it's like I'm hitting on you.
Yeah, have some beers.
The interesting point you're making is you're saying that we have these failing schools,
yes,
as a part, and it's accepted as part of the argument that this school would not meet the needs of a parent who had who had access, who had information, who had the ability to go somewhere else. And yet, that's the argument for keeping the school open, as if it's like, well, it's part of the community. You can't close down the school. Why? If it is only serving to the people who cannot get out in any other way, then it is not a service.
Right.
Am I wrong? Like, it is just, and then the replacement, and I think that's a big swing with the standardized test, is moving schools from being supplemental to being primary educators, and
100%
and moving from a diverse community and state approach to a monolithic approach have destroyed the value. And it's not saying, I don't take this idea that public schools are bad, public schools are evil, or anything like that. I think that they are operating on obsolete ideas. And I think the only way to force that crappy school to really help the kids that are stuck there is if you take away a bunch of its dollars, and and if you lose enough dollars in any business, you are out of business. And so the argument is like, well, where do they go? They're going to go to the school where everybody else is going. They're going to go to the school with the informed parents have decided that that's the best. And so now we are democratically and economically empowering schools, instead of just saying, well, you live on this side, so you get a good education. I live on this side, so I will be getting a crappy education.
Absolutely.
So, with regard to one of the things that came up on the last podcast, we talked about this, the issues of private school selectivity, and the issues of basically private schools kicking a student out, right? You've got a behavioral issue. As it operates now, lots of private schools will be like, nope, this is too much of a behavioral issue. They are no longer allowed to go to school here. They're kicking them out.
Yeah.
They're now going back to the public school. And of course, the public schools can't really kick them out. You've got to send them to alternative school, but you got to find something to do with the student.
Yeah.
How does that play out under a school choice model where the private school is receiving that $10,000 ESA money? Should they be able to kick out a behavioral student that they're not wanting to deal with? Or how does that work out?
I would put the onus back on you. How has it worked out since we have forced all students into education? The model, especially at the advent of the standardized testing movement, has been aimed for the C-. And I was told that the first time I became an administrator, sat down, I won't mention her name either or what school we were. We were at a failing school that we were turning around, and we did. But she said, here's where your money is. Focus on your C- students. Because your C- and your Ds are the borderline. Get many of those across the passing line. That's how we have a successful school. And we were facing reconstitution by the state, and we avoided it. We turned the school around to go from academically unacceptable to passing. What about the A students? What about the B students? They don't matter, because they're already going to pass the test because they're not tied in to the funding mechanism. Now, let me go further than that. So under No Child Left Behind, one of the only good parts of that was the advent, I'm using advent too much, was the increased use of character education, right? Which was, again, bipartisan. This is something we agree on, like telling the truth is a good thing. We had another president come along named Barack Obama, who decided character education was bad. And from what I've been able to gather, the only litmus test was, well, Republican passed this. And you point out that it was bipartisan. Well, that's too much logic. And so he replaced character education with mostly, we had this Dear Colleague letter that went out to all the schools. And it said, boy, looking at this data, there's a disproportionate amount of specifically African-American males that are getting kicked out and that are being disciplined. And there's, Chris, tons of data on this, right? And you could sit there and go, well, there's all these reports that say early childhood education is biased towards females. It's a lot about compliance. Boys don't do that real well. Girls will sit and be compliant. Then we have a neighborhood school model that favors the wealthy over the poor, like flat out. We have these schools and we have these schools. And then we have a selective process with college enrollment that favors certain races and actually puts African Americans at a disadvantage, put Asian Americans at an advantage. And so you could sit there and then go, all these things will sit here and tell you why this particular, so if you're any two of those, you're probably gonna have a hard time. But if you're a low income minority male, you are most likely going to end up with these things in a system that was not built for you. You're going to be told sit, all this stuff like that. And so I would think that an intelligent person, if he were president and sees, wow, the outcomes are bad, why don't I change the input? And let's see if we can offer more. Why don't we see what we can do to get more male teachers? Why don't we try classrooms that aren't about factory models sitting yet? Why don't we have people moving up? Why don't we stop telling every kid go to the most expensive college? Why don't we vary up these things? No. We're going to just change the data so it doesn't sound bad. You're not allowed to kick out or discipline a certain group of people. And then what I saw was that it became very evident that people were able to exploit systems and that there's no respite. Once the government can't kick them out, they're just stuck there. We had kids that sexually harassed with written complaints, 7 teachers in the South Bronx. He was a sophomore. He was my size. Grabbing teachers, trying to force the kisses, all these things. We could do nothing about this. That's just the teachers. Ask me how many freshman girls he terrorized. I have no idea. And we will never know. And he is going to graduate from that school because there is no mechanism. And so instead of focusing on the individual and say, oh, this poor individual has been kicked out, not everybody needs to be in a college track high school, which is what we're telling everybody right now. Maybe we need more options. Maybe we need this. But if they don't fit into the square peg, where you get kicked out of the Army, you get kicked out of any institution if you're not successful. Go find an institution, a place that's successful. And right now we don't have that alternative, but Texas soon will, with any hope.
We definitely need more male teachers. I do agree with that. That was one of my biggest things in middle school and high school. And I was removed from class. I was in transition unit behavior class, simply because I didn't know how to shut up, and now I'm hosting a podcast, which is just perfect. But and to go back to what you said before too, you're talking about get the C students across the line. Now what do the A students do? They're twiddling on their thumbs. I can't tell you how many parents I hear my students aren't, or my kids are not challenged enough. Their work is they're not challenged. Like we're not maximizing our highest IQ students, challenging them, to be the next Einstein or whatever. They're just getting by.
That's why I homeschooled for a year, right? I mean, I was that student. I made good grades.
We're polar opposites. That's crazy.
I made good grades. I was in a small rural high school. The school was doing as best as it could. Still loved the school, but yeah, there was nothing that they could really do. Like I was bored in classes. I was arguing with teachers for no good reason other than the fact that I was bored, and I was just sort of becoming a behavioral issue.
Yep.
And my mom decided to homeschool me for a year, and that was great, right? I mean, it was one of the better years of education that I had. But yeah, I was that student, and I think that the school choice model addresses that sort of split between, you will have some students that are needing to be at a magnet type school. They're needing to be challenged. There's other students that need to be at a trade school. Some of the magnets kids want to be in a trade school. You've all these different options for people to find their paths or for people to line up with stuff. I guess the question that I was trying to ask, and I think you kind of answered this, is, if you're going to be using state taxpayer dollars, if you're going to be accepting state taxpayer dollars, should there be, and I think this might be more of a technical question. So if I'm paying to send my kid to St. Grace, whatever, they got my 10 grand for the semester. My kid just won't shut up in class. St. Grace, like, you know what? We're not dealing with this anymore. They're out.
Right.
What happens to the money? Should they be able to, in the middle of the semester like that, say they're out? I mean, you used an extreme example of like criminal conduct.
Yeah.
I'm talking about like non-criminal conduct.
Just like they don't fit the school.
They don't fit the school. How does that work? Has that been something that's come up in Florida, that's come up in Arizona?
I have not seen that. I've seen the self-selection because that comes up in the charter model. And so you have legal questions that can they deny my student because my children are biracial, right? Could they deny them because they do not, meet a religious standard? And
Disability.
a disability, right?
Yeah.
I think there is an element of self-selection that we're going to accept. And by that, I mean, I don't want to force a Catholic school to have to accept a student that will go against their grains.
An atheist. Their parents,
right.
yeah.
Or whatever. And
It's like the bake the cake thing.
yeah, right. And I understand with the model. So we've given you my 10,000. This is not working out. I think it would be like, I went to private school when we had kids that just weren't working out, and I can think of their names. They just, weren't the right fit. And they left at the semester. It should be, and again, the money follows the student. If you can't educate my kid, it's just a bad fit, and I'm not stuck here. I'm going to go to the place, and I'm going to continue to find options that work for my child.
Because I think an interesting place that we have school choice right now is in higher education, right? So you have your public schools, you have your private schools, but again, you run into the issue with them. Well, if the private schools are accepting tax dollars,
Right.
there's a whole new slew of regulations that they have to abide by. Now, all of a sudden, Notre Dame can't say no to the atheist. Notre Dame has to let the atheist in because they're sort of a quasi. They're performing a government function, right? They're now in the education, getting paid by taxpayer dollar spaces. So that's sort of where my concern is. What that has on private schools, and both like the legal part of it, but also to a certain extent, like almost I feel like the fact that it's taxpayer dollars it's not like it's just the parents' money. This is sort of like everyone's money. We are asking you to perform this societal function by educating the student. We are entrusting you with public treasury to do so.
Right. And we're going to trust that the parent can make an informed decision. That's the key mechanism.
Well, I'm not talking about the parent making the informed decision.
Right.
I'm talking about what duty does that put on the institution that's now taking the money.
I think the college is an incredible comparison. And I think the pushback I would make is you're going to mostly, when you discuss, I don't mean to point at you, I'm not trying to be confrontational, but
Get the knife in.
the teacher, I used to do it as a teacher. I was trained. It said, when you're losing control of the class, make a weird hand gesture and a serious face, and they will always. And so I tried it the very first class I ever had, and I said, listen, people. And they all just paused, and it worked. So listen,
Hitting a toddler with a piece of cheese also works.
I saw that video.
I've done it. I've done it in real life. Like an
cheese at my
18-month-old yelling, screaming, throwing a fit. Popped him in the forehead with a piece of cheese.
What kind?
Factory reset. It was like a fancy piece of cheese. It wasn't
nice.
like I've got Kraft singles at the house.
Yeah.
This was my girlfriend's house. She's got like the fancy Trader Joe's cheese.
Yeah.
It still worked. Once that sucker hit in the forehead, he like froze. But anyway, I digress.
No. This is what
Stern voice and a stern
That's what they
voice
do
and
in
a weird
public
gesture.
school, and
yeah.
throw cheese.
The Cheese
This
Academy.
is why I was a disruptive student in public school.
So Better Dallas is going to be opening their own school, Cheese Academy. Principal.
Not a bad idea. A better education.
I'm in. The pushback that I have is that most of the examples that people will give of the leftism and progressivism run amok at the college level, there are going to be two things that I would really stress. One, these are almost exclusively, like the example you named in Notre Dame, tier 1 research facilities. And so the incentive to acquiesce to government regulations is not typically on student money, but on that big, juicy grant money. And so we will not have that model here in Texas at the secondary level. But let's play that again. Let's just engage just for the sake of discussion.
Right. Part of this is addressing concerns from the other side.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's assume there are big money vendors that are wanting to influence schools, whatever. Let's assume that they're there, right? The same way that there's
Hypothetically.
There are still far more colleges and universities that do not act like that. The second piece is the tenure system, the way they've set it up at major universities. If you're just going to be watched for 7 years by a group of people who all have the same belief, the winners are going to be whoever's the cheer. I'm the most left. And so you create a system where you're going to write papers, you're going to speak, everything will be to cheerlead to prove I am the purist. And so how does that system work at third generation? Well, now the purity test gets moved further and further to where academia is like 95% one ideological view. I don't think you find that in the small liberal arts colleges, the small private colleges, the things like that. I work in recruiting. I'm going to go visit some nice private, well, I shouldn't put it, but I'm going to visit some nice private institutions. Maybe they'll still have me after this. They do excellent work. They are major colleges. They have tremendous endowments. They have tremendous enrollments, and they do not have any kind of compromise with their moral obligations and their mission from a religious perspective, because they are keeping the control costs. And so I think you'll still see those schools. Would we see a big major high school? Yeah, I think but we already have those, right? You're going to have somebody that's going to come around and say, I'm going to create sports high school, and all the best athletes are going to come here. And here's my $5 million stadium. And it's going to be like $5 million. Come on, man. 50 million, 500 million, whatever.
We got to bump those numbers up.
Showing my age. Yeah. Again, education's hurting for money. But let's see, that's how you lose votes in Texas, is criticizing the Friday Night Lights.
A bond package, baby.
Well, it's different. But yeah, I think you will see those. I think you'll see schools that specialize in things in the same way that they'll specialize in CTE, in technology. Hopefully we'll have one that goes into straight internships. We have all these tech companies that don't want college grads because they're $100,000 in debt and they're 4 years behind or 8 years behind, depending on when their professor graduated. So they're like Netflix, Google, all these companies want interns. We have no system set up. We're still telling every high school kid, go to college. And that's not the right. And I'm not saying it's...
There's some programs. So I used to be on an advisory board for a high school in Dallas. So we had the National Academy Foundation was part of that. We had like a robotics program and a hospitality program where it was sort of leading into that internship. It was leading into getting more licensing and accreditation and that's like, hey, this person's really good at Adobe, or this person's really
good at Excel. That was at a high school or college?
High school.
High school.
In an ideal world, I would assume, or I would love, like if I was writing these bills, I would want a 3-tiered track where essentially everybody gets the same elementary, and then by middle school you start, instead of herding everyone together, which is the worst experience I've ever seen, which is kids in middle school, allow more self-selection and tracking. We have this idea that tracking is bad. It's tracking, if it's forced, is bad. Tracking, if it's ability grouping, has always been successful. And like even Oakes and Lipton and all those, Jeannie Oakes wrote the big book on why tracking was bad, but she still argued that ability grouping was good because we still have AP classes, right? It's still a function. And so I would want something that has a third of our kids going on this college track, because I think there's still a third that need to be doctors, lawyers, things that we need to go to college for. Another third doing internships, staying on the cutting edge of specifically tech companies, but also local communities. And then the CTE. What are we going to do to get actual people who work? I told you this story and I'll repeat it for the podcast. My wife, when she was counseling, had a peer who was admonishing a family and the student, because the student did not want to sign a student loan paper, even though he was very intelligent and very good grades. He wanted to get into welding. And the counselor was having my wife translate for this family. And she's like, you need to tell them they're dumb. They're throwing their kid's life away. And she's like, do you have any idea how much a welder makes? And the counselor had no clue. Mm-hmm. Because it's this idea that college is the only path. Because, again, it's not that the counselor is evil. Her funding, her paycheck, whether her kids eat, depends on pushing every kid to the most expensive college they can get into. So yeah, I would love a more balanced approach because, and this is the other key, and I think it's important for conservatives to understand this. If you are rigging the deck that every kid is, unless you are wealthy, is owned by a public school, and every public school is going to tell every kid to go to college, and every college is going to have a left-leaning bias, you have just set up a system that wipes out conservatism. in a couple of generations. And I think you would have seen it if people kept going to college. Like you saw a big pushback on that. I don't want to see people abandon colleges. I want to see colleges disincentivize. I don't need art majors. I don't need dance majors. These are things, again, intern for a year, get in there. Like, but we're charging $150,000 like to these kids because they're told, oh, college will get you this. And they're signing up for student loans at 17, and they're now indentured servants in a manner of speaking.
So
I'm getting out. Oh, really?
That's
no. I'm going preachy.
Well, so I'll push back on that a little bit.
Push back.
So here's my thing: is that I would actually say that right now I feel like private schools offer more pressure to go to college because that's how private schools sell themselves to parents. This amount of our students graduate and go to these types of colleges. Like, I feel like the current model that we have, I don't know how much school choice changes this as opposed to just an overall change in how we look at education as a nation. I would say, I mean, if you look at how private schools sell themselves, that's how they sell themselves. We have this college placement at these great schools. So I don't know if school choice itself is going to change that viewpoint and that problem that we have where we do overvalue going to college. I mean, I when I was working on the advisory board of high school, I used to get teachers to get mad at me all the time because I told the students that they don't need to go to college. I was like, if you don't have a purpose, like if you're not going to college for a specific reason, you probably are better off just going and getting a job and just getting some life experience of having a job and having to show up and interact with coworkers and all that sort of stuff, as opposed to, well, I got into XYZ directional state school, go in North Texas, and I'm going there because I don't have anything else to do.
Right. Well, I would ask you, who are the current clientele of private schools? What is the litmus test to get into them, which is usually financial? And then will that change if you open up to poor people like me? And will I have a different focus for my kid than college? I think you'll most likely in the first generation see a continuation of that, because you say they're selling it. Well, they're selling it to wealthy parents who all went to college and they were told this is success, go to college, the American dream. And so I think you'll have to see what we've seen now, which is the pushback from people who are coming out and saying, wait, I'm graduating with debt and a degree in lesbian poet society, and I can't get a job. And
I think that's where there has to be a bigger change, because how often have you heard this heartwarming story that everybody always gets excited about? I'm the first person in my family to graduate from college. Whenever you hear that, the automatic assumption is that's awesome.
Yes.
That's a family on the rise.
Stars have changed.
Yes.
Right? My parents were blue-collar workers, and I got an opportunity to go to college.
I know this story well. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
If you went to college and you studied, queer basket weaving theory, not all that great that you're the first person that went to college.
If you went to a tier 1 university for teaching, probably not all that great.
Maybe,
probably not going to pay that off soon.
Well, so and that's the point. Is it's a matter of, I still think you open up private schools to the blue collar folks, like I grew up as, who don't get an opportunity to do that. Like, I would have gone to private school more for the religious side of things.
Right.
But I think a lot of people are going to be like, oh, that's great. If I send them to this private school, they'll get to go to college. And then once they get to go to college, they'll live a much better life.
Right.
I think that's the thing, like that's the fiction that we have to address. And I think that's bigger than school choice.
That is bigger than school choice, but I think it cannot be achieved without school choice. I do not think, because right now the impetus for the decision is on those counselors. We have removed the decision from the parent. And while it is not a fix-all to just say, all right, you decide, you who have known anything about it, and you, like my parents were sold that if they got associate's degrees at community college much later in life, right? So for them, I was the first one that's going to go to a big school, and they had this idea, well, he will get jobs. The debt is okay because he will have these big jobs. And I think there's a disconnect between what college used to be, which was primarily focused on the 4 traditional professions: teaching, law, medical, and ministerial. And as the GI Bill came in the 40s, you now have new customers. Well, you need new offerings for customers. And so we're going to add these other supplemental programs until it becomes clubs. And it becomes, I'm paying $170,000 for a degree in something that is not going to ever recoup that, right? Why am I doing this? Oh, well, it's top. Is it? Could I have gotten the same pedagogical training at McLennan Community College in Waco as I did at Baylor in Waco? Probably not. Could I have gotten an approximation for my value? Love Baylor, sick 'em Bears, would love my $100,000 back, right? Like, that would make a huge difference in my life if I am not. This is why I got so mad with the Biden just being like, everybody's forgiven on student loans, is because there was a deal. It was like, work 10 years, and you know my story. I was in Title I schools getting stabbed in the Bronx. And then I served my 10 years for student loan forgiveness, worked my butt off, turned down private sector jobs. And then Biden's just like, forgiven. Like, who cares? I'm sorry. I don't like that at all. I could do another 20 minutes on that.
Fun fact, men actually were paying off their student loans almost double the rate than women. They were just floating that.
I knew I was a sucker.
Yeah. Sucker. I would like to give a story when I was a recruiter for the Navy about the counselors.
Yeah.
And them talking people out of joining the Navy. Now, look, I had a quota.
You're a bad recruiter.
Every month, right? And I was going to get someone to join the Navy.
Yeah.
Right? Have to go to the counselor. I have to get their transcripts, and it's best to just have them on the side, have them on your side to get the ominous dominus, right? Well, and maybe you can explain this. I never truly found out, but you were saying earlier, they're incentivized to send them to a larger university. We were told the schools get some kind of point system. If a student joins the military, that's like 1 point or whatever. And it's like if they go to a local college, it's 2. If they go to university, it's 4. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, it's not quite a point system like that. I never had a scorecard, but it is ranked. And so when we look at our success, again, with those metrics for success, not all colleges are created even. And so if I am talking to you and you can get into both Brown and Tarrant County Community College, I'm going to push you to Brown, not only and so when we do our graduation announcement, we send our thing, we're going to say, we have an Ivy League educated, blah, 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 blah. Now, to you, Brown is the difference in $200,000 versus something you can pay out of pocket, but they're not going to explain that to you. What they're going to say is, sign this paper and all the money will be taken care of. And now I have taken care of this big barrier. Now, where we get into where it gets really effed up, I'm so proud of myself. My wife's gonna be so happy I didn't curse yet. She's not gonna watch this, but where it gets really effed up is when you go to the colleges with the racial quotas. Okay, so can I give a couple of minutes to talk about why this is so evil and bad? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so imagine you have a system with 5 tiers, right? And number 1 is like community college, and number 5 is like your Ivy League, Brown, Harvard, Columbia, whatever.
Sure.
Okay. Now imagine every college at the top says, we would like so many of Group X. Well, we don't have enough Group X in Tier 1 applicants, and we have too many of Group Y in Tier 1 applicants. Let's call them Asians. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah,
and so
Asians.
what we're going to do is our Tier 1, we are going to reject Tier 1 Ys. So where do they go now? Tier 2. Okay, keep that in mind. And we are going to steal all the Tier 2 X's we need and move them up to Tier 1.
Yep.
It's a win, right? We are helping these minorities. They are now going to great schools. The problem, you now follow it through. Now my Tier 1 Asians, well, Tier 2 does not have enough of their Group X. So where are they going to get it from? Tier 3. So now Tier 1 Asians are competing academically against your Tier 3 minorities.
Yeah, and they just can't hang.
Look at graduation rate. Who's number 1? Look at student retention. Who's number 1? And then flip it. College dropout rate, who is number one? Student loan debt, who is number one? It's an evil fucking system, right? That puts these certain groups at a disadvantage and then other groups at an advantage. And it's something that could be easily solved. And it's easily explained as, this is terrible. This is making whole communities way worse, like generationally worse. And but look at these black kids on the cover of Columbia magazine.
Yeah.
We are diverse. And it's like, yeah, but that kid was not academically prepared for tier 1. So then that's why the dropout rates are. That's why the student loan rates are going to disproportionately affect certain groups. And I keep saying certain groups because I don't want this to get aggregated like I'm a racist. But it's like, because I'm not the government official. It's like, you know what? We need some more minorities here. We need some less minorities here. It's like, that's the racist people.
Yeah, it was black men had the highest dropout rate. And like when they first started this, they were kicking people out. Okay, you can't meet them.
Yeah.
But then it got even worse when they stopped kicking people out and they just kind of floated them, or they changed the testing standards.
Yeah.
And that's like where it got. It's like, okay, now the Ivy League diploma is like, what is
it worth?
Right.
And I got told when I graduated, I was like, I'm like my parents, like never, Baylor, I'm one of you. And they're like, no, everybody's got undergrad. You got to have masters. That's where it's at. It's like, we have this layer.
It's true though. It's true. Like it is.
Yeah,
like
I know.
A college degree now might as well be a high school degree 50 years ago.
It's inflation.
And it's having the Department of Education decide that they're going to subsidize every single person that gets to go to school, where it's like, okay, well, you no longer have to worry about paying that $200K to Brown.
Yeah.
Right. There was a point in time in history where it's like, I gotta be able to afford to do this. So I either need to get scholarship money, or I need a private lender to think that I'm worth the risk to send me to this school. Now you get in, there's going to be the money.
Yeah.
The schools it changed the schools from worrying about having qualified candidates to, unless they're really trying to do the U.S. News and World Report rankings, just put butts in seats.
Fill them.
That's all you need to do, because the money will follow. But I wanted to get back to school choice a little bit.
Okay.
And address another sort of common critique.
I can keep doing rants,
right?
And if you want, instead, sermons.
That's fine. We'll have a rant cast with you at some point. So, with the critique that you're stealing money from schools, right?
Yes.
Oh, you're going to underfund the public schools. Foundationally, would you mind describing in a reasonable amount of time how education funding works for the public schools? Where does the money come from? If you take this money, if you take the $6,500, whatever it is per student away, is that going to mean that the buildings are going to crumble and fall apart? Like, would you talk a little bit about that, how the education funding works, to understand that argument?
Yeah, and how it relates to the two bills, I think, is important. So there's a mix of federal, state, and local dollars, and the biggest flexibility that your local schools are going to have are in local taxes and bonds and things like that. And so most of the time that I have found that people are complaining about the taxes and the costs, they're talking about property taxes. And the fixed incomes are usually going to come from the state and the federal, and that's where we say the mechanisms, our funding mechanisms, butts and seats, right? And the timing may change from state to state, but there is a certain time where butts and seats count as your attendance. For every kid you have there, that is $1. And so these schools, again, the intent is, well, we want kids in schools, but then the incentive goes from I want kids in schools to learn is I want kids in schools to give me money. And so you'll see schools that are like, just show up till 9:30, and then there's this mass exodus around 10 because they've been counted. The schools don't want the kids that don't want to be there, so they find these little ways to get out of it. We talked about the college enrollment, and then the other one is their standardized test scores. The STAR test, and then their actual purse strings attached to federal funding mechanisms through No Child Left Behind, and then the wonderful Barack Obama added more to that with more curricular and, like I said, strings. And this is the most salient criticism has been the strings, right? Because Republicans did say no strings attached, and I think that was poor choice because there will always be some. If I'm taking part of a communal money, there's a community, like you said earlier, there's a community agreement on that. And then the question is, okay, so we're going to take these kids. That is going to come not from the local money. So the two bills where they differ, Senate Bill 2 is going to apply to 10,000 a student, 2,000 a homeschooler, and that is across the board. We'll add no new funding for the public districts. This will all be, I think, $1 billion from the state. We have a $24 billion surplus and $27 billion rainy day. So it's a really good investment in terms of that. The House Bill 3, I would call, and it's what you would expect, is a little more of a compromise because it only does 85% of funding, which is similar to the Arizona model. So the idea that every kid we get to leave the public school system both can be educated to a point we were talking about earlier for 85% of what they're going to cost the local school district is an interesting proposition. But that's what I have found to be true with private schools is by necessity, just like when you're running a private business, they're trying to maximize their dollars. And the left tries to vilify this idea that being good stewards and being financially successful is some kind of evil. And that's not true. I want schools that are responsible with money, and these schools that are poor stewards of money will be punished under this mechanism because there will be more limits on those. Now, they're saying they want to give teacher raises or teacher bonuses within that. And so the idea being one is going to look to raise specifically private schools, and this is how we will get our competition. The other is we're going to flood both markets with money. The idea maybe schools will see this as an incentive to change. I am supportive of both bills. I am wary whether the extra funds to public schools will result in better outcomes. I'm dubious. I have found that with most public initiatives, when you throw more money at a problem, you don't get better results.
Yeah, I think you ought to just more money, more problems.
Yeah, that's it's tattooed on my chest.
Yeah. So and I want to try to summarize that because that was a lot, right? School funding is a dense topic. So yes. We have at the bottom, we have local taxes.
Yes.
You have bonds, which are essentially loans that are taken out that are repaid with tax dollars.
Yes. And those are usually your big expenditures, the new science building, the new football stadium, things like that.
Yeah. Then you've got and those are usually paid for with like additional sales taxes or something like that. In your
something from the community. When my first school, we did one for a new marquee for the front of the school, and it was like a 5% or 5-cent sales tax or something. And it's like the community voted it. We got a new sign, and then once that was paid for, they stopped the tax.
Yeah. So then you have other funding from the local level or property taxes.
Yes.
Right. These are usually your maintenance and operation stuff for your M&O taxes.
And this is mostly going to go to facilities and what I would call operational management. That's how most school districts are going to do them. And
then you have money that comes from the state. Mm-hmm. Some of it being the money per student, right? The butts and seats payment that they get. That's the $6,500 or whatever the exact number is. That goes for what? What is that money?
Per pupil spending. So that's going to be attached not attached to the student. It's going to be allocated for that student. And that's the distinction between these two.
So this is stuff like buying books and subscribing to
Google Classroom and all that.
All that sort of stuff is spent on that.
Yes.
Where does the teacher pay come from?
The teacher pay is going to come as part of the district funding. So that's why you see such discrepancy in there. There's going to be a baseline based on that state pay. But this is why your well-to-do districts are going to have the best teachers.
And so when you say it's district-based, so is this... What money comes to the school from the state of Texas?
The per pupil spending. So that will be your baseline for teacher pay.
Okay. And then from the M&O taxes?
Mm-hmm. You can add on to that. And sometimes that'll be through stipends. Mm-hmm. Charter schools love to make it stipends because it's a carrot. I found that your wealthier districts don't do that because they want to keep talent happy. And so they're going to offer just fiercely competitive pay raises is the and so
And then, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
sorry, no. So the wealth, just the common sense. If I live in a property wealthy area, I will then have more money to get the better teachers, is why the better facilities and things like that. Though again, those go into the bonds, but it's the same funding mechanism. And so, sorry, go ahead.
And then on top of that, you have federal funds that come in that are tied to the schools adopting certain behaviors or doing a certain way on a test, things along those lines.
The biggest one is going to be standardized testing and high stakes testing based out of No Child Left Behind, and then curricular ones under Obama with A Race to the Top. I'm very fond of both those programs. They're just stellar.
So for the people that are worried that the public schools are going to fall apart, they're still going to be getting their federal funding.
Yes.
They're still going to be getting their local sales taxes.
Yes.
Or their local taxes, their property taxes, any bond stuff. That stuff is all still there.
Still there.
It's just the per
Student
pupil
funding
right,
that is no longer allocated, it's attached. And so
which should theoretically, if you have less students, you should have to spend less money educating students.
yeah. And so if right now there is a huge pinch in education. And I don't want to step on topics earlier, but there's a lot of immigration crackdowns. And while, what's the court case in 1982? It's Plyler v. Doe. I can't remember what it is, but I want to say Plyler v. Doe. If I'm wrong, just assume I was right. It says that that schools cannot limit access based on immigration status. And so that said, though, you have a lot of families that are attached to those students, and ICE is using that as a mechanism to get illegal immigrants. And as a result, we are seeing less illegal immigrants in our schools. And so you have pretty sizable drops in student population in some of our urban areas. And that's coming out of the mass exodus out of COVID when parents finally saw what they are seeing. So they're already facing a reduction in force as students go to homeschool. This is just allowing all parents that access, not just, we were talking about those informed parents, to go ahead and jump ship because they were on the Zoom calls or whatever and saw the nonsense that was being propagated from the education system. This is going to, in theory, open up that to where I am now forced to make a choice, and I now am aware I have a choice. When I was, I ran in South Dallas. My big one was school choice, and what I found is most the parents, the lack of information was around the idea that they could get access, and so the idea was, well, Highland Park or Bishop Dunn or any of these, whatever the other school is, was for other people. Even the charters, which have been around for a while, there was a cultural disconnect I found specifically in giving it away. I live in a low income neighborhood. I'm poor. A lot of my neighbors did not have a functional understanding of their options. And I was trying to get their vote, so I didn't have time, but I tried where I could, to be like, oh man, apply for a charter school. And they were, I can do that. And it was like, yeah, you have all this. And so that was what I loved about HB3 was the promotion, that we were going to do things to get this out. We were going to inform the parent, because I keep saying the biggest, I don't want to be too hyperbolic. I'm already that way. One of the bigger problems we had with parents with change is, well, I was taught this way.
Right.
And so everyone thinks because they sat in a classroom, they are qualified to be a teacher. And they'll tell you that. I had people in job interviews be like, yeah, I worked at Kmart for 20 years, got laid off, figured anybody can teach, so here I am. And I'm like, well, I'm going to hire you. The kids in the Bronx are going to love you. Actually, that guy was in Temple. But we sorry, that guy was just fun. But like, everyone thinks they have this mental model because they sat in a classroom. They weren't the teacher. And so when we would go to say stuff like, well, we're going to do distance ed, or we're going to introduce these new concepts, so many parents like, we didn't do that in school. It's like, they didn't have the internet, man. I don't know what to say. And you can't say that. You have to go, you're right. And you have to find some nice way of saying, well, time moved, man.
Yeah.
The reel kept rolling.
Do you, about the district that you ran in? I mean, what if we get into school choice?
Yes.
What is the possibility that a bunch of private schools really start developing? Because that's their biggest concern. Well, yeah, of course, private schools are going to pop up in North Dallas, but what about South Dallas, Cedar Crest, and all those places?
If they're not, then they're missing a golden investment opportunity.
Yeah.
That's a lot of customers that are trapped in terrible schools. And so,
Yeah, I feel like that hasn't been the way with charter schools.
well, no. The charter schools have this. When we remove the flexibility from charter school, so when you have standardized assessment, you will get standardized instruction. And so if we have these charter schools and we say, we originally were like, and I always use KIPP because I work there, my wife works there. KIPP was originally a constructivist and behaviorist in their schools of thought. Remarkably different from the more traditionalist approach we get in the common public schools. And they were wildly successful. And then if you know their history, they alienated some more conservative donors, Koch brothers. And that was terrible. I didn't even do it right. They then had to find new avenues for income. And so they went to federal grants and it became, we will do whatever the federal wants. Well, now you're just doing an imitation of the public schools. Right. And KIPP is no longer the largest charter network as a result. I don't know that. I think that they are, and I know they are trying to recapture that because they've let the funding dictate the service to the kids, and that is not why they had a chart. That's not why Dave Levin and those guys founded the network, was not to just become the public schools with different letters. And so again, going back to that, the idea that the common assessment is not a set high stakes test, and that it is just something I can pick. The cognitive test. I can just give a cognitive test to my kids every year, which is pretty basic. But the state can then use that for data grouping, and are kids getting better or worse? Right? Yeah. Did you do something well or poorly?
Well, I think my point about the charter schools is that the charter schools weren't relegated to only the wealthy parts of town.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The charter schools are everywhere.
Yes.
I mean, there's a bunch of charter schools that are in South Dallas that are in more of the low income areas. So I think that's my thing about the private schools is, of course, like, as soon as you tell somebody, hey, we have a bunch of parents that want to get the heck out of DISD, they'll give them an option. We just watch Deion Sanders open up 15 schools in Dallas or something like that.
I mean, that'd be great.
Right. And
I don't know if you remember how Prime Pro Academy
was. Well, more that you want options.
Think about it.
I want as many different options. I don't want more just of the same. And again, down in my neck of the woods would be amazing. I think that's where the greatest need is.
Right. The most room for improvement, I would assume.
Yeah.
Rather than essentially holding cell, they graduate to move to another holding cell. Like that's the line there.
So putting a little bit of more of the issue-based, taking the issue-based hat on, putting the political hat on.
Yeah.
Do you have any prognostications or any thoughts about how the legislature reconciles SB2 and HB3?
Yeah, I think HB3 is where they're going to settle because it is the greater compromise. It keeps additional funding into the public schools. So if you are of the belief that the public schools just need a kick in the pants and that they can compete with the private schools, then that is where you want. I think the set amount of having 10,000 versus a percentage. It's a good enough bill. It's a good priority. Again, there's things that I would change personally, but I think HB3 passes. I think it passes with, I'm going to say 79 votes, maybe 78, one coward, or I don't know. I think I just do. I think it does. And I think Abbott signs it pretty quickly because they'll go back to the Senate. No, I don't think we're going to see a bunch because the bills they're so similar. And the real thing is, do we want to take this extra 15% and kind of cut it, or do we want to take it and kind of kick it back into the schools to see if they can kind of get their act together? I have heard the arguments from both, and again, I'm not trying to vilify the public schools. So, I look forward to having more options. And man, again, the criticisms that I would like. They added transportation, they added tutoring, they added all these things that I can do. And like you said, if I'm homeschooling, I can get $2,000 just by having my kid take a cognitive test every year. That's not nothing. If you're a working class family, let me go ahead and tell you, diapers ain't cheap. And getting all those access and then going back to the other way, it's all voluntary. If I, as a private school, do not want to, or let's say I'm going to open up Karl Marx High School, and we say, well, we don't believe in testing, right? We're going to get rid of all that, and it's like, well, then you can't have access to the funds. You have to have some kind of mechanism for us to measure whether our money is being used wisely or not.
Teaching great evil.
Love it.
So I appreciate all that. Like,
Thanks,
really
man.
appreciate you providing your obvious expertise on the topic. Any closing thoughts on the school choice front? Any nuggets you want to leave our audience with?
I appreciate you enduring my rants and sermons in between those answers.
Well, just talk to producer Kyle. He's the one that's going to have to cut them.
He's going to edit them all out. Good.
That's good. I am more than happy about the rants.
Okay,
If you have a great feeling about this.
That's the whole. I mean, and look, that's the point of doing a long form podcast. That's the whole reason about doing this. Is I'm just so tired of watching the news or watching, even committee hearings where it's just a bunch of little sound bites, a bunch of little sound clips. There's no substance. There's no nuance. It's just whatever, people sending out, angry emails, calling people evil for wanting school choice or whatever people are going to do. With that note, new segment, Kyle's Current Events.
Kyle's Current Events. That's right.
Where Kyle tells you what happened in the news yesterday or 2 days ago, depending upon how quickly we publish the podcast.
Yeah.
Well, it should be.
What's on Kyle's Current Events today?
Well, first I got to get this screen to change. So, okay, boom. There we go from Tech Scorecard. Major ICE operation nets 646 illegal aliens arrested in Houston, including gang members.
Is that another chicken plant, or what they do there?
This was just all over Houston, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but here's are some of the high points of those people. Not all of them had criminal records, but they did break the law by coming into this country, not at a port of entry, and seeking asylum. 140 were criminal aliens charged with or convicted of aggravated felonies or other violent offenses such as homicide, aggravated assault, or family violence. 34 criminal aliens charged with or convicted of sex offenses, including aggravated assault of a minor, possession of child porn, or rape. 93 criminal aliens charged with or convicted of driving while intoxicated. 52 criminal aliens charged with or convicted of illicit narcotics, including drug trafficking. 51 criminal aliens charged with or convicted of property crimes such as burglary. 39 criminal aliens convicted of firearm offenses. It is unlawful to carry a firearm if you are an illegal alien in the United States. You do not have a Second Amendment right.
That is true.
So
these are the bad hombres that Trump was talking about.
These are the bad hombres. When people are walking down or they're protesting, it's a total punt. There are people that have come here that are breaking the law. Some of these people are very violent, have no respect for anyone else's rights or safety. And they're hiding within the population, just like, terrorists do when they're fighting. They hide amongst the innocent population. Yes, there's a lot of people that came here that are just seeking a better life. That's all fine. But if we can't track any of them and we don't know who any of these people are, it's impossible to have a safe community. And these people are running amok and they take advantage of the situation. And this kind of goes into the schooling thing that, we have these people that show up. The system's already under strain. Mm-hmm. And like you said, the students or the kids show up and you have to provide for them, which puts more stress on the students with teaching them English and stuff like that. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. It's the lift, and again, it's a legal matter. So it's not like these the local school district can deny service. And I don't hear any conservatives being like, that we should deny. It's an organizational thing.
Right.
Really, that's not in the platform, huh?
No, it's not.
Surprised that it's not part of the platform.
Of the school choice bill, yeah. No, it's I always use the analogy when people are like, well, they just want a place to stay. It's like, will you let them in your house? And he goes, well, I don't know who they are. I go, exactly.
I love those videos with like, here, sign up here. They're at the front. Like, I only live in a 1-bedroom. That's why I'm not signing that thing.
Right. It's just a common idea. And then I love what you were saying about it, the exploitation of our asylum laws. Like right now, I would assume that most, especially if you're of a conservative belief, but statistically it looks any of American, that they have a very cynical view of our asylum process because it has been taken advantage of to such a degree that it is not if I were to say, man, I really agree with asylum laws, I think academically we would sit here and go, yes. Do we agree with how they're functioning? No. And so the disconnect there, and then the idea that it goes back to that weaponized empathy, that we're supposed to just burden our communities, not just in education, but in all our services,
everything else.
With everything else, my biggest one. My wife immigrated here, and to do that, she had to pass a test and do all these hoops that English and
pass it in English.
All these
Where's she
things.
from?
She's from the Dominican Republic.
Nice.
Yeah, I think so. And same with my brother-in-law. And I told this to Chris, because so many people have taken advantage of the visa program in her island. My father-in-law could not get a temporary visa to come to my wedding. And it's just again, our system, we can have these nice ideals that we all agree with, but if they're not functioning the way we want them to, if they're just exacerbating the issues, then we have to, get on board with kicking some people out, tightening up the door, lock your windows, lock your doors. I think that's what we've done at the border after leaving everything wide open for a little while.
Well, again, we're not running a charity.
No.
Right? Like, it's one thing to be charitable, and Americans are one of the most charitable people in the whole world, if not the most charitable people in the whole world. But when it comes to immigration policy, it's not a charity program.
No.
It's entirely rational to say the people that we're bringing in, we want to add to our society. We want them to be a net positive to the American society if they are going to be welcome as immigrants or as new citizens or whatever it's going to be.
Well, and we don't have a mechanism for fixing it if we're ignoring the problem. And that's the bigger... it's been 40 years since we've passed an immigration bill, and the landscape of the country is completely different, and more the political alignment is just odd. When I tell people that Obama and Hillary Clinton voted enthusiastically for the Fence and Border Act, they think that I'm crazy, and I have to show them these things. And I say, this used to be a fairly bipartisan issue.
Last amnesty bill was Reagan.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, he got played on that one.
Well, it's people there's a difference between you wanting to be kind and you wanting to be empathetic, and then assuming people will do that with fidelity as opposed to taking advantage of it. And he thought that they would follow through on looking at that amnesty with authenticity, and all they did was, how can we get more of it? Let's do it again. Like, if you reward bad behavior, or if you subsidize bad behavior,
you're going to get more bad behavior.
And so,
absolutely.
This is the thing about the amnesty, and this is something that I've never understood. I don't know, maybe the 3 countries in the world that we should be granting asylum would be Canada, Mexico, because we're next to them, and Afghanistan, because there's some folks out there that did us some solids that deserve our help.
100%.
But if you're in Honduras and you're worried about the violent gangs in your neighborhood and you're able to get into Mexico, congratulations, you have escaped the violent gangs in your neighborhood. You don't need to come all the rest of the way up to the U.S.
Yeah, there's a logical disconnect in the left, which is every other country is dangerous and uninhabitable, but we should take in everyone from every other country who is making, and I'm like, which is it? It can't be that the immigrants are and it's like, well, then only the good people, like,
right. Yeah.
Yeah, let's XL pipeline then up to Canada. That would be even more safe up there.
yeah, like
You know? They're even further away from those gangs in Guatemala.
Right. There's no logical framework to it. Just like with if they get here and they apply for amnesty, well, the rule says you have to apply for amnesty at a port.
Right.
Port of entry, yeah.
Right. And so why are we rewarding the bad behavior? Well, they have a tough time. It's like, well, but then everybody's going to have a tough time. Mm-hmm. If I give a kid, when I was an assistant principal, if I said, okay, you don't have detention because you have a sad story, guess what I'm going to have tomorrow? 100 god dang sad stories, right? And they're all going to be singing and they're just going to be the saddest things.
That's a good catch, Stringlet.
Thank you.
Well, and part of it too is that, here, if your country is not doing good, let's say Donald Trump would say something else, they'd call something else. You should fix your own country, right? Like these men that are leaving their country, like, oh my God, it's so bad. Better come to America. Like, dude, just fix your country. Fix it. Make it nice, right? We go to these places to visit because they're very pretty, right? But they don't want to stay and fix their own country. What makes people think they're going to come here and then put in on this country?
Well, because right now the option is, do I want to fix my own house or go live in America, right? Like, do I want to, they have a clear option of, if I get to America, I'm an American, or they thought they did. I guess that's now they're changing, but that's
or they knew they'd get more handouts.
El Salvador removed that option. And just like, well, we're just going to get tough on crime and we're going to attach our dollar to something that can't be manipulated by a politician. And wouldn't you know it? Like all that theft and crime went away. And it's like, if I think the other one, because you're touching on this, like we have these countries with problems. And this is the one that drives me nuts. It's like the left, one of my liberal friends, like, man, colonialism, American intervention in it is terrible. It was the worst. We've ruined so many countries. Yeah? Yeah, but we need to send more aid to this. How is that not interventionism? Oh, no, this is good interventionism. Oh, okay. It's like your good racism, right? They have these. I've never met a group that wants to say something is evil, but then say, but we need to keep this evil so we can make it good. It's like, no, that makes you the evil people.
Right. Well, and the overarching thing when it comes to us, I don't blame anybody that's born in another part of the world that dreams of nothing more than becoming an American.
Sure.
Just like I don't blame any American who wants to be a Texan. You want to be with the best.
And if I were born in Honduras or I was born in Lima, Peru, or wherever, I would beg, borrow, and steal to try to get here to be a U.S. citizen. Right? It's the best thing I could possibly do with my life. It's the greatest country in the history of the world. Why would you not want to be here? But that is why it's so important for that greatest country in the history of the world to have a sane and enforceable immigration policy.
Right.
Because the obvious rational choice of everyone in the world is to try to come here if you give them a chance to.
Yeah.
Literally, if you did a poll on all the people on the planet, like it'd be 99%. Yup.
Now, here's an idea.
Okay.
Here's an idea. What if all the people that said they were going to leave if Trump got elected,
Oh, yeah.
what if we just traded them?
Yeah.
One of them for, I'll say, 2 amnesty seekers.
Without criminal records, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
some criminal records.
Sure. I mean, who doesn't make mistakes? But if we can get rid of one of those blue-haired loud people, and we can get 2 people that actually desperately want to be here in America, I don't know. I don't know if there's any other country in the world that would take our blue-haired weirdos. But if there is, if you're out there, let me know. We'll work it out.
We'll make something happen.
Yeah.
I had a question. So with the talk of amnesty, where do we stand on overhauling the immigration? Because I look at like Australia, right? And they have a system based on need, right? And so like 2 years ago, we had a carpenter shortage. And Australia would say, okay, if you're a carpenter, come on over, right? Whereas the US, it's still this, if you can make it, you're here, kind of. And there's just this this idea of why don't we, because you're saying like this idea of everyone wants to be here. And this reminded me of the Trump, was it gold card plan?
Yeah.
To leverage that.
That's just going to be all
Plane he
Saudis.
took from Australia.
Right. And
Australia does that already.
Right. And it's saying, why don't we do this? Why don't we make sure that, and then I think you have the populist share. You're going to deport every undocumented person. I've heard the plans where they say they're not offering amnesty, but they're offering temporary citizenship as long as you have no criminal, but you can't vote ever.
Right.
What is I feel like the Republicans have stage one here, right? Which is we got to get the criminals out and we got to stop the leak, right? You can't fix a leak while the pipe's still spewing. And so that's kind of the thing is like, all right, we're going to secure our borders and ports. What is phase two? Because I want to hear a concrete plan from Republicans, and I don't think I'm getting that. And it's
Well, you're not going to get it because you have a bunch of people that want to get the little sound bites. They want to appear to be the most hardcore anti-immigrant person you can be. They don't really give a rip about actually having a functional immigration system. Because the thing is like, yes, you do have a bunch of people that are currently here illegally. Mm-hmm. It is not feasible to deport them all.
No.
Like, I know it's a great thing to say in a talking point, but it's not necessarily feasible. And then to your greater point, that's just us dealing with who's here. How are we going to allow people in the future?
Right.
Like, what is because right now it's a lottery. It's just sort of, there's certain things where it's like, okay, well, if you're a spouse or you're, a parent or whatever, they're employer sponsored, but otherwise it's just a lottery system. You put in, maybe you get picked, maybe you don't. We'll see what happens. That seems to me the silliest way to do it.
Right.
That's the silliest way to do it.
It's just like, what?
Especially from a provision of power. If we were like some loser country and it's like, we'll take what we can get.
Right.
Right.
No, I think that's a good point, that it would be helpful to have people immigrate here who fit a particular need.
Like means tested or something.
Maybe means is just like, to your point, like
intelligence wise.
Yeah, hey, if we need trades.
You're a carpenter, yeah.
If you're a carpenter, if you're a plumber, if you're whatever, we need those people that are here. This is something that I feel Bush did a good job of when he had the short-term work visas.
Yeah.
Where it was just like, look, I know that you don't want to have, like, you want to go back to your home. You just want to come here and work for 4 months, picking, fruit during harvest, and then you want to go back home. And that's the best thing you could possibly do. Okay, that is a needs-based immigration policy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know. That sounds pretty smart. I think we'd have to look at data and then make informed decisions. I think winging it has gone pretty well.
If I can't scream about it on OAN, then it's not a good policy.
Yeah.
So this is what I've started to see the shift is like just recently. Well, we're going to have, because they're starting to realize they can't round up that many people. Mm-hmm. The manpower on the ground, there's just not enough.
Right.
You got to have 15 people to go on a raid to hit one person.
Yeah.
Now they're starting to talk about, well, we're going to have to make an environment into which they're going to want to self-deport. Right. So that means the subsidies, the this, the that, they're going to start going after landlords. They're going to start really going after employers.
100%.
And that is probably the most cost effective and most efficient way to get that going is to make people self-deport. But yeah, there is a huge question. I don't think that the Republican Party really want to get into it because of what you said. So like if you're someone that's like right of center, if you say, well, let's build out a system where we can have worker visa. You're going to have Steve Bannon on this side.
You're a rhino. You're a dirty rhino. Yes. You're betraying America. You're a traitor. We should deport you.
Yes, and then you're going to have
get it right.
Yeah.
Something. I don't know. You'll have someone on the other side saying, "Well, that doesn't go far enough." So you're in a lose-lose situation as soon as you come out of the gate with, "Oh, well, here's what just I think is a balanced policy of this and that." No one's really willing to step up just because. Get rid of them all has kind of worked to get us through the election. It's a tough spot.
This goes back to my complaints about partisan primaries. You have the partisan primaries, you will absolutely select them. It eventually leads to the more extremes on each party being your elected officials.
Right.
Yeah.
Which means your problem solvers are no longer welcome. If you're going to compromise, are you kidding me? we have the 5,000 planks of the Republican Party of Texas platform. You better not deviate a single comma from that, or we're going to censure you because you're a dirty, rotten rhino, traitor, Democrat, plant shill.
Yep.
Like, that's the untenable place that we're at right now. And to your point, like, yeah, no one's why take the risk?
Why take the risk?
Why take the political risk of stepping up and being the lone person there taking fire from all sides?
Yeah, you're really in a lose-lose situation, which is really unfortunate. That I don't know if we get it. I don't know really how we unwind that, though.
We get to pass new legislation. It's a huge hill, because how are you going to get to 60 senators? What bill is going to get? This was the hill with the school choice bill here in Texas is, again, I could have written something for James Rodgers that's going to be far more right than this, but it's not going to pass the Texas House. It's not going to get 76 votes.
What's the point?
Right. What's the point? And so I would rather Republicans be more pragmatic and honest. And I don't think, to Chris's point, I think there's a huge contingent of Republicans in the cheerleading section who do not want that. I think that they are, and they're incentivized, right? They're the DEI for us. They will never not find a rhino. They will, because you have to come to us to spot these people in this cascade. Like, when I was running, I got emails when I would do those. I won't say stupid. They were great. I love my campaign manager. I would do those policy announcements or send out tweets or whatever. You get an email the same night. You're a rhino. You're a white Christian nationalist. It's like, I cannot be both of these things. You are right. One of you is wrong. And so
you should connect them
right.
Like, you guys figure this out, then come back to me.
So I just and I think that I think that most voters are, especially those that take an informed position enough to get involved in primaries, understand that. But there's a huge swath that's big enough, and they're the vocal ones. And I know we've talked about this. They would rather be king of a little 10-person Republican club than to be a duke, or I don't really follow royalty, but whatever is lower than that, and beholden to a unified kingdom. Even if that unified kingdom would better serve them, it would better serve their people, they lose their power. And so they are always going to stand as obstacles and roadblocks, and they're going to demonize anybody that challenges that. And we need, as you know, what you need, I'm not important, but the people that have these voices need to make sure that we're championing. And the best thing you said the other night was the idea that we're building the coalition to 80%, right? Whereas the other side is letting the 20% drive the car right off the cliff. And so the 80% is powerful. The 80% says we want reasonable immigration laws, and we've gotten them. And the 80% says, yeah, we want these government spending to come under control, even if it means we have to tighten the belt a little bit right now on a personal level. I'm okay with that, because I know in the long run there's not funny money that's just going to devalue my bank account. I don't know that there's enough of that. Or there's enough. I'm not trying to toot your horn, but there's not enough voices like a Better Dallas that are focused on the big picture, right? Beyond the step, we've cleaned up the border, okay, and we've gotten rid of the criminals. Now what? Well, we should already had that conversation if we're already in step one, right? We've got the foundation for the House build, and we're like, all right, should we get a blueprint going?
He's just gonna wait for JD Vance to take that, because he knows it's gonna take 4 years to get any.
Now that's,
you just can't create a vacuum, right? This is the mistake that Republicans will make, is they'll hit a step, they think we won, and then it creates a vacuum. And I'm going to say, for example, in Texas, we had the Heartbeat Act, and then ultimately just being a prohibition on abortion. Right. Like, that was the legislative win. That was we did it. Mission accomplished.
Yeah.
Let's put the banner up and put the flight jacket on and pretend like we just won the war. But this is just a step right now. Like, you've now created a whole new set of issues that you've got to be ready to go fight. You've got to go win hearts and minds. Right now, it's a matter of like, okay, well, the Supreme Court just said that each state is its own laboratory of democracy to determine what its abortion policy is. Guess what, Republicans? You have to go win the abortion debate now. You have to actually go convince other people that your viewpoint is right. Because it's not just enough for the Texas legislature to pass a bill, because the moment the legislator flips, somebody else is going to be passing the opposite bill. So you've got to win hearts and minds. You've got to actually win the idea. You've got to be able to win those conversations. And you talk about the 80. America coalition builds backwards, right? Everywhere else in the world, they have this proportionate, representation where you go, you cast your vote in all these different parties. There'll be 5 or 6 parties. And then after the election, you go build your coalition and you govern. In the U.S., with the winner-take-all system, you still have that variety of viewpoints. You'd still have 6 or 7 parties if we had proportional representation. Except for now, as Republicans, you coalition build before the election. You try to put those different viewpoints in one or these 2 political parties before you have the election. And the problem that we have right now in Texas is you have Republicans that don't want 2 or 3 of those other viewpoints under their roof anymore, and they're just going to end up losing elections over it.
Yeah, and it's over silly, like it's silly what's personal to them, and what shocked me because I got in way too green into politics, didn't know anything and didn't know anyone. And I was very naive of the Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It was like, well, if I have the best ideas and I'm one cocky SOB, this is how it will work. And I stood on that first debate stage with Republicans. And I listened to some of the most insane rambling I've ever heard in my mind. Like, I'm sitting there having a panic attack when they said, like, one guy's like, we're going to go to this immigration problem is from the Catholic Church. We are going to the Vatican and we will arrest the Pope. And I'm just sitting here. I was like, did somebody put acid in my Big Red? Like, is this real? And then that wasn't the most, like,
it's a real
that wasn't
Billy
the
Madison
craziest thing. Like, there were other crazy things, and we're just sitting here and people are just nodding. And I'm like, so a lot of this is if voices are talking, people will listen. And if they are up on a stage, people will assume there is good reason. And I do not want to be the Democrats picking winners. I think we agree there because that doesn't go well. But we need to be concerted and united. And right now, we are not united behind anything except we love when Donald Trump wins, but we don't really love like the actual policy. We disagree when as you were saying earlier, with some of the policies. But we love the idea of his winning because it's the style which he wins. He spikes the football. The left cries. And then he can trap them, right? He's the master of like, oh, this is 80% popular. They're defending the 20. Go defend this. Go defend women and men having mixed sports despite Title IX and, lifetimes of experience from generations that men and women are different. And yet the left will die on that hill. And the Republicans don't see that we have those same issues at the state and local level. They're just huge obstacles to being a much more influential, robust, and effective party. And Chris is going to solve that, though, right? Like Chris is going to
fix all of our
fix
problems.
all
Please.
of this. Start with Dallas. Then do the state, and then I guess the country and then the world. Like that should take a couple months, and you got it.
Well, with the immigration thing, I mean, I think that Donald Trump 2.0 really has done a good job as far as coming right out of the gate, and owning the libs on all the other things, just kind of keeping everyone kind of off foot. I have felt this past week, maybe the last 5 days, 4-day rolling 4 or 5 days, has been a little bit of a slowdown. And I think that's going to be his biggest mistake is kind of slowing down almost. I've kind of seen the Democrats starting to coalesce around some kind of messaging. One of his biggest promises too, on day one, he was going to deal with the egg crisis.
Yes.
And somebody that eats a lot of eggs, it definitely affects me. me see if I can get this thing to
what,
Are we
switch.
talking like Gaston from Beauty and the Beast level eggs, or
No, we're talking about
When I was a lad, I ate 4 dozen eggs
right.
every morning to help me get large. And now
I
that
don't
I'm
even know
we're
this.
gonna get, you can't do that because
No,
they're gonna
actually,
get, they're
you
gonna
just
copyrighted.
fortunately, we're not monetized.
Oh, okay, good.
So you can't
Now that I'm
demonetize
large,
it.
I eat 5 dozen eggs.
Were you a choir teacher or drama?
I was kicked out of choir
Oh.
for talking too much. I
That
know
makes
you're
sense.
shocked. I
Yeah,
know
like,
you're
dude,
shocked.
we're trying to sing here.
I
We're not trying
see
to.
that, James. Yeah, what's going on with eggs?
So, in case you didn't know, the Biden administration, due to a bird flu outbreak, decimated, killed a lot of birds. Actually, approximately 111 million birds.
That's a lot of chickens.
That's a lot of chickens, mostly egg-laying hens. They were trying to make sure that it did not
Sexist.
spread throughout
Yeah.
the herd, and I didn't know this, but bird flu can actually spread through the eggs to humans, and that's
There
what
are some
ultimately.
alphabet people who are going to be so mad that they did not. Because how do we know those chickens were female? How do we know those
they were
hens?
hens?
How do we know they did not identify?
Could have been egg laying roosters.
This sounds like misogyny. I think Biden has some answers.
Well, he doesn't know what happened either
No,
way.
he doesn't have answers or questions. He's,
Now, I think so. I don't know anything. I'm not in agriculture. I don't know anything if 111 million was the right number or what have you. But in the past roughly 30 days, the price of eggs have come down by almost 5%.
Excellent.
Now,
Good.
is it reasonable to say that, hey, you should have blamed Donald Trump or you should have blamed Biden for it? Either way, I think that's just politics. But now that's been the thing that's pissed me off the most, is that the left has been using this thing like, haha, Donald Trump, you voted for cheaper eggs and he still hasn't given it to you. It's like, you are fundamentally not understanding your opponent, the Republican Party. Right? Now, a lot of people did vote for economic reasons for Donald Trump. There's no denying that. But just to sum it up to, oh, he's going to make everything cheaper and my eggs are going to be cheaper and that's why I'm voting for him, is just completely missing the mark on why people are attracted to Donald Trump, why he built a big tent movement. And they're really leaning on this, but here's the problem. Now the hens are coming to egg laying age,
as they do.
and even once we get through Easter too, we're coming into Easter, so it's going to stay up. The price is going to stay up. After Easter, this thing is going to plummet, and now their talking point is pretty much going to be null and void, and the memes are going to be absolutely amazing. That's actually what I'm waking up for.
Did Kyle just blame Christians for the price of eggs?
That's what I heard.
Oh
I
my
did,
gosh.
because it's stupid that
You're gonna get
Christians
some
go
emails,
out
you
and
rhino.
are you going to defend the bunny too?
I'm not going to defend the bunny.
Oh no, the bunny's part of Christianity, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
fertility. Yeah.
That was the
The eggs are part of the whole story
There's
as
a whole
well.
the
South
bunny
Park,
moved
there's-
the stone away when
There's
Jesus.
there's a whole South Park episode about it.
Yeah.
But no, that's great news about the drop in the price of eggs. Also,
Huge win.
Great
Yeah.
to hear that we got more hens. We need more American hen.
More American hens, and we definitely
no communist hens.
We don't, yeah. And I want the people taking care of the hens, picking up the eggs, sorting the eggs. I want them to be American-born citizens. I don't want Tyson Chicken in there hiring a bunch of illegals, undocumented workers.
You have no idea. This is a big passion point for Kyle.
I can tell.
He
We
is
brought it up twice
like-
already.
Listen, they're taking our jobs.
this is his education.
Oh.
They're taking your jobs, dude.
Kyle is very big on American-run poultry.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, poultry specifically. I thought it was
yeah.
like
Just
American
Listen,
hires.
just American everything.
Yeah.
okay.
Listen,
For us, by us, when it comes to poultry.
Okay.
a million net jobs for foreign-born workers, 8,000 net jobs for American-born workers in any rolling 12-month period that you can look at. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Native-born Americans are being left behind, and it's because they have to compete with wages from the third world. Most of these people are showing up without their family, so of course they can work for less. They rent a bunk or a room in a house.
Well,
That's what you verify, baby.
you're also seeing a disproportion of. So we compete internationally, but only in specified jobs. And I'm not saying we don't need tech from India or Southeast Asia specifically.
Sure.
But what I would love to kind of bolster your point is a more robust education system that shows more Americans competitive with that, right? It's not like they're having secret schools in India, right? It's not like I work in international education. You could go into any of these schools and say, hey, can we replicate this? Are there Americans who want to learn engineering and was it 7 days a week in like an Indian school? I'll bet you would have families that want to put their kids, but they are not given that opportunity. Yeah. And then you're just like, well, these Americans are dumb. They can't compete. And it's like, I think if you gave people opportunity, and again, this is the whole, I'm circling back to my issue, your poultry, is the school
Love
chefs.
chicken.
Just like chicken boy. Listen, Colonel. No, I think that the more that you get that marketplace, you're going to get better education options with better education outcomes.
Absolutely.
So
let me ask you something specifically with, like, for instance, the H-1B visas. That's been the huge thing. And I also like how, I won't get on that, but so you have UTD right down the road here.
Yeah.
A lot of people going there for tech jobs, STEM in particular. They're looking to get into these entry-level jobs at these tech companies.
Yes.
However, the tech companies have a ton of H-1B visas, and these are not Einsteins of India. These are essentially people doing entry-level, medium type coding in situations.
Are you saying there should be a metric for entrance?
I'm saying that I would like to see the tech companies that are abusing the system, and I think that they're abusing the system, that they are not able to find American-born citizens that cannot fill those jobs. That's why I think that they're opting in to get cheaper labor from overseas, bringing them under this visa program, be like, no, these are Einsteins. Like, these are the really smart people. It's like, no, I think these people are, and I'm going to say it, taking the jobs of our college students. We just got done saying, we keep telling these people, go to college. They're in debt. And now it's a challenge to find those entry level jobs where they actually, make their, build their resume.
So, there was, and I want to say it was Trump, it might have been Vance, but it was somebody in the realm was saying that colleges and universities should have to post, instead of academics and being like, oh, we're tier 1 university, which just means other tier 1 people voted for us and liked us. What if they had to write their employment, right? And how much each degree, what is the return on each degree? They have no transparency, because you would not see, because what right now the kids are told, again, it's that American dream. You go to college, as long as you're there, it doesn't matter what you're studying. And that's not the case, right? The engineering program, the medical program, there's money makers. And then it's not saying don't go be teachers. I'm not, ministers. We have other more altruistic avenues that people can pursue, but we don't need universities, again, to teach or to make degrees for customers, right? I think that I'm of the John Dewey school of progressive education, that education's purpose is to serve the community, whether that is specifically through the industry and need, but then and then also through citizenship and making sure they're good citizens. The idea that the schools will produce and the industry just has to take it is not true. Again, we have outsourced labor outside labor sources, of which these companies can take from, but I think we agree they probably exploit to the detriment of the American people, or at least the job market. But that's anywhere. If you're bringing an influx of labor that will work for less, for whatever the reason, you have devalued the market for labor and for cost. Now I'm really getting into Ayn Rand. I'm about to do an Atlas Shrugged speech.
Very interesting. Chris, what do you think? What do you think about H-1B visas and tech jobs?
More of a MasterCard guy myself. No.
Somebody had to do it.
So, look, I think we talked about this once before. I don't have a problem with them. I do think that there should be, like we talked about, if you're going to bring somebody in overseas, they need to make a certain percentage of what the American would make. Right. So have it be something along the lines of, okay, if you're running a company and these are your American, your citizens that are performing in this job function, you're going to have to pay this person on your H-1B like 85% at the very least of what these natural born people are being made. It's a matter of like, look, if this really is the Einstein of India that you're bringing over to do this, this really is somebody that is specially skilled that's going to, again, improve our society by doing something that maybe an American can't, right? You have found the Werner von Braun of whatever it is that you're doing, and you need to get him over here. Okay, you should have no problem paying them at least 85% or whatever the number would be of your natural born employees in that regard. If you're just using if you're just trying to use the visa system to get cheap labor, and there's Americans that can do the jobs, I don't see that being a benefit. That's my thing. Like, I look at immigration as a plus minus system, right? Like, I want to just be adding pluses.
Yeah.
I want people coming into this country that are going to make our country better.
Right.
They're gonna be good. They're gonna be good citizens. They're gonna have good jobs. They're gonna have great ideas. They're gonna bring special skills. They're gonna fill needs that we have. Like, they're pluses that are being added to the system. Bringing in cheap labor for big tech, to me, is not a plus to the system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's I couldn't agree more. And as far as, we just talked about the ICE raids. Generally speaking, people on H-1B visas don't get in. They're not getting in trouble.
They're not the ones that are having assault with deadly weapons.
No,
and stuff.
they're not the ones. I mean, they might, might be creeps or something, but generally speaking, they are coming here to get ahead, especially from India.
And that's fine. I don't have a problem with people wanting to come here to get ahead.
Yeah.
But if we're going to let him here, we're going to let him in here. We need to be getting ahead too.
Yeah.
Right. We're not running a charity.
It's an ad value.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Any more Kyle's current events?
Man, we talked so much about school choice. I had
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Well, I know we definitely appreciate it. We had the Weingarten, and she had a bunch to say about the school choice, especially about Texas. But it's kind of like, obviously, head of the union, teachers union, she's not going to like it. They're going to lose a lot of membership, right? And that's a major, what? Like, what's the little violin? Yeah. And that's a major Democratic funding source, is teachers union. And that's one reason that they are so against this. Not because they look at numbers or anything like that, or see our failing system, just slowly but surely failing. I think it just really has to do with, and it's really unethical, but they see they're going to get less donations.
I wonder if anybody has done a study of American education performance before and after the proliferation of the teachers unions.
I would love that. I thought you were going to say, because I came in with like private versus public versus charter and homeschool. I was ready for all that data. And so I was like, oh, he's got it. And it's it's something I don't have.
No, I want to know how much better or worse the education system and the education performance in America has gotten, the stronger that the teachers union has been.
There's no way it's gotten better.
Yeah. Well, I have a bias, but I have a thought.
My experience, for what it's worth, is it depends on how the state. So one of my best friends who was in my wedding is the union rep in the school we went to in New York. He and I have vastly different views. But in New York, the teachers union is incredibly powerful.
Sure.
I was at a school and I had a teacher who kept giving unwanted massages to boys. Like, just would walk up and start rubbing their shoulders. And it was the first time you're like, I will address this. And then when you get to like number 6, I remember being like, what do we do? And my boss said, we have to meet with his union rep. And that was different than Texas. Whereas in Texas, he'd be gone, right?
Right.
You cannot keep giving. And it was like a student had said no. He went back to, and he's like, I'm being friendly. And it's like, right.
Not under any condition at all.
It's like, bro, you're talking about it. Anyway. So,
and you have to walk on eggshells with these people too, because they pay a fee.
Right. And let me flip it. There's a Florida, they have a teachers union, far less powerful. And so this is why Ron DeSantis worked with them on getting pay raises as part of the ESAs. Because they don't have unilateral power, they're forced to be collaborative. So I would want to break it down by states that have powerful, states like Florida who have collaborative, and then states like Texas who we technically don't have teacher unions, we have teacher groups, which don't have the same function. They can't strike or anything like that, so there's no collective bargaining. I mean, I'll find that for you. Let me get that for you. I'll get, and you can not give me credit and say, look, I found this on air in the next podcast. But I will find that. That's I can sit here and tell you my lived experience, but I don't put much stock in that. Too many drinks, memory's just gone. It's Cuba Libres.
Well, speaking of too many drinks, it's time for the A Better Conversation to wrap up so we can go to the after hours.
Yes.
Right.
Once we roll out a paid subscription system, you can watch the after hours. Maybe. But we're not there right now. But in all seriousness, James, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your wisdom, sharing your thoughts, sharing your ramblings.
Yeah, that.
Really have enjoyed the conversation. Producer Kyle, any closing thoughts on your end?
I'm very, very happy with this conversation. And this is the exact reason we set all this up.
Right.
So we could talk to people like you, come on, have in-depth conversations. We can ask questions and take the conversation where we want it. Chris is here to kind of keep us back on track. Yeah. We would have probably ended up somewhere wild, but thank you for coming out, and we'd love to have you back.
Absolutely. And I want to thank Summer again, or the other guests that we had on School Choice. Like, she had a great perspective that we really haven't, heard a lot of people profess. Would have loved to have her in person. Maybe we can have her in person in the future.
Love that.
But thank you, everybody, for watching. If you're still here, if you are, smash the like button.
Smash the like button.
Smash
it.
All the kids are saying it on YouTube.
Yeah, I think you need to Google.
Smash the like button. No, that's you're running out of there. We're not to the after hours just yet. Gently click the like button.
There you go.
Smash that subscribe button. But seriously, we're going to have elected officials on. We're going to continue to talk about these issues with the legislature. If you want to know more about what's going on with the Better Dallas, you can go to our website, www.abetterdallas.com. You can also find us on Facebook. You can also find us on Instagram. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again in a week.
Peace.